Welcome to SLP Nerdcast, your favorite professional resource for evidence-based practice in speech-language pathology. I'm Kate Grandbois.
And I'm Amy Wonka. We are both speech-language pathologists working in the field and co-founders of SLP Nerdcast.
Each episode of this podcast is a course offered for ASHA CEUs. Our podcast audio courses are here to help you level up your knowledge and earn those professional development hours that you need. This course, plus the corresponding short post-test, is equal to 1 certificate of attendance. To earn CEUs today and take the post-test after this session, follow the link provided in the show notes or head to slpnerdcast.com.
Before we get started, one quick disclaimer. Our courses are not meant to replace clinical advice. We do not endorse products, procedures, or other services mentioned by our guests unless otherwise specified.
We hope you enjoy the course.
Are you an SLP or related professional? The SLP Nerdcast Unlimited subscription gives members access to over 100 courses offered for ASHA CEUs and certificates of attendance. With SLP Nerdcast membership, you can earn unlimited CEUs all year at any time. SLP Nerdcast courses are unique, evidence-based, with a focus on information that is useful. When you join SLP Nerdcast as a member, you'll have access to the best online platform for continuing education in speech and language pathology. Join as a member today and save 10% using code NERDCASTER10. The link for membership is in the show notes.
This episode is brought to you in part by listeners like you and by our corporate sponsor, Ventress Learning. Ventress Learning's culturally and linguistically responsive teaching resources help speech-language pathologists, reading specialists, and teachers more effectively meet the assessment and instructional needs of all students, including those who tend to become underserved in language and/or literacy. To learn more, visit www.ventresslearning.com.
Hello and welcome to SLP Nerdcast. We are so excited for today's episode. We are here to talk about a topic that is very near and dear to our hearts. Collaboration is something we talk about on the podcast all the time. And today we have the pleasure of welcoming 2 expert guests. Welcome Becca Sylvia and Christy Stearns.
Hi, thank you for having us. We're thrilled to be here.
Hello, we are.
Now, Becca and Christy, we're excited to have you with us here today. And you're here to discuss, like Kate said, how to effectively collaborate with other professionals as a speech-language pathologist. But before we get started, can you please tell us just a little bit about yourselves?
Sure. So this is Christy speaking. I am a speech language pathologist. Becca and I, well, now I'm bringing Becca in, but Becca and I met, I think that's important to the story. Becca and I met as first year grad students in Massachusetts, and that's how we became friends and also co-founders. But as for me, I'm originally from Florida. Went up to Massachusetts for grad school. I did some work up there, worked at schools for autistic children and individuals with developmental disabilities, did a high AAC concentration. I really enjoyed doing that, and also working with that upper school age, so like 14 to 21. And currently I'm back in Florida, and yeah, I have a little 3-year-old and back where my husband and I are from. So it's been very enjoyable, and it's been really nice to be able to maintain such a nice friendship and collaboration with Becca once we started Communication Community. So happy to be here.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So I am Becca. I was born and raised in Massachusetts. As Christy mentioned, we met in grad school. After grad school, I moved out to Colorado and started my career in speech language pathology, doing a lot of AAC, high-tech AAC, and then moved over and did some stuff in the schools. And Christy and I started Communication Community, our blog, originally with the main focus on AAC, but then kind of a little bit of everything. And so it's been awesome working together in this kind of professional capacity for a number of years, while also being really good friends too. Just great.
I'm sure the two of you can relate in a way, working with a friend and also, someone who holds you accountable, at least for me.
Yes, definitely. There
Yeah.
is nothing better than having a partner in crime, a
A,
partner in nerds.
a nerdy kindred
Partner
spirit. It's good.
Yes.
Yes, to
Y-
keep moving, moving things forward and having another brain in the room. It's just so great. And we're so glad that you have agreed to share your hive mind, your knowledge, your shared knowledge with us today as it relates to collaboration. I do need to read our learning objectives and disclosures before we get started, so I will do that as quickly as I can. Learning objective number 1, list the 6 competencies for interprofessional collaboration. Learning objective number 2, describe generational communication styles. And learning objective number 3, describe collaboration through personality awareness. Disclosures, Becca's financial disclosures. Becca is a co-owner of Communication Community LLC and an employee of a health tech company. Becca's non-financial disclosures, Becca is a member of ASHA and co-manages the Communication Community blog, the Circle community, and social media accounts. Christy's financial disclosures, Christy is a co-owner of Communication Community LLC. Christy's non-financial disclosures, Christy is a member of ASHA and co-manages the Communication Community blog, the Circle community, and social media accounts. Kate, that's me. My financial disclosures, I am the owner and founder of Grandbois Therapy and Consulting, LLC, and co-founder of SLP Nerdcast. My non-financial disclosures, I'm a member of ASHA SIG 12 and serve on the AAC Advisory Group for Massachusetts Advocates for Children. I'm also a member of the Berkshire Association for Behavior Analysis and Therapy.
Amy, that's me. My financial disclosures are that I'm an employee of a public school system and co founder of SLP Nerdcast. And my non financial disclosures are that I'm a member of ASHA Special Interest Group 12, which is AAC, and I participate in the AAC Advisory Group for Massachusetts Advocates for Children. All right, learning objectives done, disclosure done. Becca and Christy, why don't you start us off by telling us just a little bit about why interprofessional collaboration is important for SLPs? Why is this something that we should care about?
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's a lot of reasons why we should care about it, but I would say the number one is like collaborating effectively can lead to better outcomes for clients. So that's kind of what we're here for. We want our clients to have good outcomes, and there's lots of things that go into having good outcomes. And one of those things is that collaboration with the clients, their families, but also like the team and other professionals. And so we believe that by understanding different communication styles, collaboration methods, different things like that can improve collaboration and then therefore outcomes across disciplines.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's reflected in some of the studies that we'll reference today as well. The objectives that Kate outlined at the beginning of the podcast, we will talk about competencies for interprofessional collaboration, generational communication styles, and collaboration through personality awareness. We pulled from different research that hit several different collaboration areas. So yeah, the competencies generation, then also, those personality assessments. And we thought it was an interesting area to explore because for such a deeply personal field where we're on so many different teams. I don't know a lot of other professions where we're operating in so many different groups, even though you have these other professionals that you work with day in and day out, and whether it's a healthcare setting, school setting, there's that component of adding, a whole other client and their caregivers and families. And so operating in a very healthy, constructive team environment and a collaborative environment is so, so important, I think, for our profession specifically.
All right, so we can start by talking about the 6 competencies for interprofessional collaboration. There is an article by Bainbridge et al. That discusses essential competencies required for effective interprofessional collaboration in healthcare settings. So there was a framework developed by the Canadian Interprofessional Health Collaborative, also known as the CIHC, that basically their goal was like, we want to enhance teamwork among healthcare professionals so that care is efficient, coordinated well, and patient-centered. So all of those things that were like, these are all great things, you know? And so frameworks can be helpful sometimes because it could really kind of lay out very specifically, like here are some kind of areas to focus on. And, you know, they're kind of can be refined over time, but I think we thought it was really helpful and we really liked how they kind of laid it out. And so we can talk about each of those 6 ones. So Chris, if you want to start with the first few.
Yeah. So as part of these competencies, one of the main competencies is role clarification. So, with your team, what is each person on the team going to do to support the client's overall goals? So, what are your roles and responsibilities on this team? So it's incredibly important that while you understand your role and what you will bring to the team, and those responsibilities clearly outlined, you're also aware of the roles of others. Kind of like okay, once you know your role, you know what lane you're staying in, and you know if maybe you're getting too close to someone else's lane. So that gives you the ability to recognize boundaries and the scope of practice for each professional. And I think when those are outlined, we can perform our best and our strongest for our clients.
I just want to make a quick comment based on something you shared earlier about how unique our field is, because we're touching so many different aspects of student care, client care, patient care, whatever word you're using. We also have such a shared scope of competence. So we share
Mhm.
our scope with special educators. We share some scope with literacy specialists, with behavior analysts, like it or not. If you're working in a hospital setting, you might share, some aspects. You might be having disagreements with your ENT over over something that you're seeing, or whether or not to recommend a bedside, or I don't know, I'm not a med SLP, so I don't really know what I'm saying. But my point is, we share our scope with so many other professionals that understanding your role, I have to assume, is a critical piece of being able to collaborate effectively without getting grouchy, because sometimes it can feel grouchy.
You're absolutely right. And I think that um, also considering that each setting may be doing something different, and those roles may look a little bit different within each setting. Of course, we have our specific clinical roles and responsibilities that we can't waver from too much. But, you think about some of that. I know you were mentioning the feeding and swallowing piece. There's a lot of overlap in healthcare settings in that space. So making sure that whatever setting you're in, that those roles are very explicitly clarified. And that's also a prevention measure for some of that conflict, because maybe in another setting, you were way more hands-on with that particular role that maybe the OT is taking more of a lead on, and that's more of the general team expectation. So making sure that is clearly outlined is what's going to be healthy for collaboration with the team. And then also that it obviously reflects on the client as well.
I'd imagine too that when you're clarifying your role, that in and of itself could be promoting collaboration, because hopefully you're having a conversation with these other providers and talking about the overlap and talking about what's going to happen. So just by the nature of that conversation, you're sort of setting the stage for some collaboration there.
Exactly. And then that kind of leans into another competency, which is team functioning. And that's essentially looking at how will the team function together to support one another. So we definitely need that role clarification to be able to understand how the team as a whole is going to operate. So this is very important for working effectively within all of those different team environments for all of those different clients and families. And when you have those roles in place and when you understand the different team dynamics, that fosters more of a sense of mutual respect and promotes that positive collaborative atmosphere. So in essence, having the role clarification contributes to team functioning and that continuous collaboration, that it's important to check in on a continual basis versus just establishing those roles at the beginning of the school year, so to speak. It's important that we continue to check in to ensure that continuation and the maintenance of the team functioning.
Mhm. I also think too, if you have good role clarifications, it can be helpful on a team if, say, someone is out, then you can know, okay, well, this person normally is the one who makes sure that this student's AAC device is out and charged in the morning, but I know that they're absent today, so someone else can kind of fill that team member's shoes for this instance. And so that's a way to kind of, support the team, support each other when someone can't fulfill their role for a day for a specific reason.
And another area of the 6 competencies for interprofessional collaboration is that interprofessional communication. So we've covered the role clarification. We've covered, roughly how the team is going to function and check in with one another. Or I guess more of the frequency, right? We want it to be continuous, so that interprofessional communication, that's what that collaboration is going to look like in essence. How will the team collaboration be maintained? So whether that be you have a meeting at the beginning of the year and outline what that might look like for you and your team. Do you want to meet on a weekly basis? Do you want to meet in person? Do you want to have email, Slack, Messenger, whatever you're using, check-ins, but making sure that interprofessional communication, everyone is on the same page with as well. So making sure that this communication is clear, respectful, there are timely exchanges of information, because this is, timing is everything in our profession in a lot of ways. I think I was listening to one of your podcasts earlier this week, and I know that in different states, certain evaluations have one time frame, and then in other states it may be a longer or shorter time frame. So making sure that those time markers are also there, because say you're submitting information for an IEP, for example. Okay, well, if you're submitting that information on the last day, but you have 5 other members of the team who also need to look at that documentation and make their edits or revisions or what have you, that's incredibly important.
I want to make one comment about interprofessional communication and wanting to make sure that, or one of the things that I found to be most successful is bringing humanity into those conversations and into that communication. So the colleague that you're communicating with is a human first and a professional second. I have found that a lot of friction in interprofessional communication can stem from not having that human connection. So not understanding that someone is having a really bad day, or maybe didn't sleep, or is having a crisis at home, or even approaching communication with this underlying sense that your objectives are more important or your objectives are more urgent. And you may end up talking about this later, so I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but I just think I so value you bringing up the competency of interprofessional communication, because it isn't just about timeliness of your workplace or the word, whether or not you use an exclamation point in your email. I mean, there are so many layers to making sure that that goes well, and I think so much of that is rooted in being a person, just being a human being, connecting with a human being.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
There's so many, sorry, like times where like you might get an email that's like, you're like, is that a little snarky? Am I reading this the wrong way? And as much as you want to say like, it's fine, I'm just gonna, forget about it. It can impact you when you're going into your next session, you're thinking about it. And so, and that can impact, outcomes in general. So yeah, having that like frame of mind of like, let's have strong communication because that does touch everything, whether it be directly or indirectly.
Yeah, and approaching, like Kate was saying, each person as another human. You're not just this bot on the other side of your email screen. They entered this profession too. What I would like to think it, to care for clients and make sure that they receive the best outcomes in care. And a lot of this too, I know that these 6 competencies are a little bit more on, I don't want to say the drier area, but these are a little bit more clean cut guidelines, so to speak. And they're very important. But I think the big picture too, with all of this discussion about collaboration is that all of these objectives that we're going to discuss require perspective taking. And it seems so basic, but it's not. It's important that we have that awareness and we can perspective take, not only, have that knowledge for teaching our clients in some respects, but we need to practice that and model that as clinicians and professionals and when we're working with others. So.
Well, and I have to imagine that perspective taking also slides into the next component when you're thinking about your actual clients and their caregivers. I don't know if you wanted to talk to us just a little bit about what are some of the components there that come into play when we're thinking about this interprofessional practice.
Yeah, I mean, a big one that I know people we hear about, we talk about is that patient or client or family community-centered care. So at the end of the day, like the needs and the preferences of the client, like that is what's most important. And so understanding their perspectives and their values in this decision-making process is really important. And that may mean that like roles may shift a little depending on a client themselves because of their situation, because of their preferences, um, different scenarios. And so understanding what like their goals are, cultural considerations, their interests. If say, for example, they primarily speak Spanish at home, and there's one member of the team that doesn't do a lot of the daily communication, but they speak Spanish, and they can say, you know what, I can take on this role for this family because it's important that we have daily communication with them because we know that's important for this family, and I can do it and I can speak to them in Spanish or communicate with them in Spanish. Versus another family that might say, I do not need daily updates unless it's an emergency. Like I prefer weekly updates and someone else can give me those weekly updates. That is when those understanding of working together as a team of doing one person's doing one than the other. But at the end of the day, it's so that the clients are centered. And so another competency, and I think this is something that can be difficult, but I think it is important to kind of have an idea about, is that interprofessional conflict resolution. Because as much as we would love to not have conflicts are going to come up. And again, this might be conflicts within the team itself, or there could be a conflict with a client because something is going on that there's a conflict that needs to be resolved. So being able to address conflicts rather than trying to kind of sweep them under the rug, I think is important. And then kind of also being able to understand of recognizing sources of conflicts to say, like, does this happen because we're not meeting regularly enough? Is conflict happening because the roles aren't clarified well enough and there's some overlap, or there's an important job or task that needs to be done and no one's assigned to this role, so it just keeps getting missed? kind of trying to figure out like, why is this conflict happening and what can we do to address it and try to mitigate it so that we do not deal with it again, or it's, lesser, I think can be is helpful. And I think kind of what you had mentioned earlier too, Kate, about like these are humans, so like let's try to stay positive. We are all humans. We want to stay positive. We want to offer constructive feedback. We don't need to, do the blame game, pointing fingers all the time, because that doesn't really, that can hurt rapport. It can hurt collaboration, and so being able to kind of find ways through conflict resolution is an important piece of being able to collaborate effectively, for sure.
What you all are saying about these components of humanity is making me think of a little story I heard once called The Baby in the Backseat. Have you heard this story? I swear I'll make it very short.
No, I'm so intrigued.
But essentially, Amy, have you heard this story? Have I said this to you before?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so hopefully our listeners and you all will get something out of this and it's not totally off topic, but essentially the story goes where imagine you're in your car, you're driving to work, you're late, you've got coffee that you've spilled in your lap, and you end up hitting every red light on the way to work, and you're sitting at a red light and the light turns green and the car in front of you doesn't go. And you're like, what is going on? And you get so frustrated and you start laying on your horn. You're like, I'm so late. The light cycles to green, the light cycles to yellow and then to red again. And you're like, I can't believe this. You become increasingly more enraged. The light cycles to green again. The car still doesn't go. You can see the person in front of you fiddling around with something in their bag or something in the back seat. And you decide that you've had enough and you're so angry. So you get out of the car and you storm right up to the front door or the window to yell at the person, why aren't you moving? And you see that the woman is stuck and can't get her seatbelt open, her seatbelt off, and her baby is choking in the back seat. And there is an emergency. And all of a sudden, in that moment, your anger dissolves immediately. And you are, oh my gosh, this is a person who needs my help. And you go right in to help the baby in the back seat. So the point of this little story is you never know when someone has a baby in the back seat. And I carry this with me as a little story of if someone is being grouchy at you, if there is a conflict, if someone is being snarky, you never know what someone else is dealing with in their personal life, and trying to remember that there could be a baby in the back seat. There could be something going on, instead of taking it immediately personally and retaliating or talking to your supervisor or sending a snarky email back that doesn't have any friendly exclamation points. There are so many ways that we can handle ourselves in conflict, holding space for what someone else might be experiencing that we just don't have visibility to. And that's my story. I won't take up any more airspace, but hopefully that was helpful.
No, I think that's good. And it made me think of a time when I had a supervisor who said it in a different way, but basically was like, there are going to be times where you can't give 100%. So, or like your team members can't give 100%. And I think of it in the sense of, number one, okay, recognizing, that my coworkers or other people I work with, because of what's going on in their personal life, they have a baby in the backseat, they can't deal with it. I guess for me, and we'll go into, I guess, like personality styles a little bit later, it gives me permission to also to say, okay, sometimes I have a baby in the backseat, and it's okay if I can't give my 100% because we are humans, and like that's okay too.
Yeah, the lack of I'm putting quotes around this, but the lack of effort, so to speak, is not coming from a place, I don't want this client to succeed, or I want our team meeting to start 10 minutes later. When we can stop and pause and think about, like the two of you were saying, think about, okay, I don't think that this is an attack on me. I think maybe they had a stomach ache. Maybe they needed to take a little bit more time before the meeting, and that's why they were late. I've had stomach aches before. I'm sure other people have too. I think it's important to stop and actually consider, like, how involved are you personally in this matter, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And that leads well into the final competency, which is collaborative leadership. So the idea that leadership roles can be shared within a team, it's not up to one person to be the leader. And so that way, if that one person is, can't give full effort for whatever reason, or has a bigger role to fill one day, other people can kind of take the lead. So, an example of this is if you do have a standing, weekly meeting or monthly meeting where you talk about the clients, the plans, action steps, all of that. Different people on the team can kind of be the person who leads that meeting and, organizes it together or kind of summarizes the meeting minutes at the end and leads out to say, after the meeting, it's my job today to say, okay, Christy's going to do this and Amy's going to do this. And then the next month comes around and Christy's that person who does it. So kind of understanding that leadership roles can kind of change and other people can take different leadership roles or different times, I think is also helpful to know that like, yeah, we're not stuck in like we made this decision once and now it's going to stay like that until the end of the year or the end of whatever. All right, so those were the 6 competencies, kind of that overall framework. So the next area we're going to talk about is the generational communication styles. And so it's important to understand that generational differences can affect communication with the caveat that like we're talking about generational trends, not like prescriptions of saying this is what all Gen Xers are like this, or all boomers are like this, because that's not true. And we know that, but there are trends. And these trends come from, surveys, reports, based on things like significant global events, cultural shifts, development of technology. We're saying that a lot of the Gen Z population is really into technology versus maybe boomers aren't. Well, guess what? Like the technology wasn't around when boomers were growing up. So it's not that they're choosing, it's that it's kind of based on cultural and life. But that being said, there are certain trends, and we think just kind of having that awareness of that there are some generational trends can be helpful. So again, seeing that humanity in the people you're working with is helpful in kind of understanding why they may think things a certain way or might approach things a certain way or have different opinions may be impacted by the generation that they grew up in. So we'll talk about kind of the overarching trends of the generations that we would see in the workplace today and kind of their, rough age. We also know that like, if you're kind of right on the cusp, you might feel like, oh, I really belong to this generation or whatever other generation. But more or less, the first 2 we'll talk about are baby boomers, which are around age 60 to 78. And for communication styles, they tend to favor the face-to-face communication and then like more, like formal, respectful interactions, more of that like traditional communication style. The next generation, so Generation X or Gen X, roughly ages 44 to 59. Less of that like face-to-face traditional communication and tend to prefer more of the concise communication, efficient communication. Let's kind of like get the job done.
Sounds
Yeah.
about right. What would you say, Amy?
That resonates for me as a tried and true Gen Xer. That's
Yeah. Well, and it is interesting because the information that we're reviewing and these communication styles that we're discussing across, boomers, Generation X, millennials, and Gen Z, this is pulled, what was the survey? It was like over 400,000 individuals. So like these are self-reports of, this is my age range, they're circling their age range and this is their preferred communication styles. And again, I think for me, I would fall personally into the millennial range, but I see different communication trends from other generations that I also would subscribe to. So again, these are more of just trends, but by understanding that these different preferences do in fact exist, it gives us a little bit more of that exposure and awareness that, okay, if I'm someone who only wants to, chit chat via email or via workplace digital messaging, and somebody else really wants to meet with me once a week in person, I'm not taking that as, wow, this person has no respect for my time. I know that this is more efficient, but, why do they want me to meet in person, and there's so many more layers than that. And that's not really true to me because I love meeting in person. So, I actually do. Becca and I differ in that respect and somewhat. Becca can do more on, I need more in-person accountability, and Becca likes corresponding via email and in messages. But anyways, so yeah, Becca covered baby boomers and Generation X. So millennials, that's another generation that is roughly between the ages of 28 to 43. So this is the generation that's a little bit more comfortable with digital communication. Again, a lot of that has to do with cultural shifts in the development of technology. You know, millennials tend to value feedback and collaborative approaches. So this might look like higher energy collaborative environments that appreciate real-time feedback, often communicated through digital platforms. So I can say for myself, I think back to grad school and I loved the immediate feedback. I walk out of a session and my supervisor is holding up a list of things for me to improve. Like, I really enjoyed that. While I know that there are other individuals who want to wait till the end of their week so they can get all of the rest of their documentation done without distractions, and that's not something that they need to consider. So roughly that's, millennials. And then our last generation that we explore is Generation Z, Gen Z, which is roughly 27 years of age and younger. So this is more of that technology has, from a cultural perspective, has really evolved for them as compared to, millennials, Gen X, and baby boomers. So Gen Zs are described as highly digital. They're a little bit more accustomed and have the expectation of multitasking. Generations, Gen Z might expect a little bit more of a fast digital communication is adept at navigating multiple communication channels simultaneously. I'm making a generalized statement, but I know several different business professionals that they have someone who falls into the Gen Z generation, managing their social media profiles. I think of some of my younger cousins who are in their early 20s, and they also are starting up business ventures with the interest of doing that. Whereas I don't personally have that type of capacity, but I love to see it, and it just goes to show that within each of these, rough generational ranges, there is so much that each can bring to the table in different ways, and to kind of highlight those strengths more than see them as differences. But it is important to be aware of maybe some of those preferences, whatever it may be, whether it's consistent with the generation or not. It can help you with that teamwork and collaboration. And maybe you're taking a approach where we have one colleague who really prefers those in-person meetings. We have another colleague who wants to do a little bit more messaging and emailing. Okay, maybe we work with a hybrid approach. Maybe we meet in person once a month, and then we have those digital weekly updates at the end of each week. So again, just meeting your team where they're at and having that mutual understanding.
I think mutual understanding there is key, because I can already hear the voice like, oh, boomer, or oh God, what a Gen Z, rolling your eyes, or making the assumption that the way that someone else prefers to communicate is an affront somehow to you or disrespectful. And I think the point here is understanding that other people have preferences, and it's your job as a respectful colleague to acknowledge those preferences, maybe not accommodate those preferences all the time, but not take it personally, and could sort of look at it through a lens that can diffuse any of that conflict.
hmm Yeah, I know, Christy and I had talked about it a little bit, especially in, I would say, our field, whether you're in a school and a special education team or you're in like a SNF and you kind of have the rehab team, you may have, coworkers who are, on the same level as you in terms of like same degree, same credentials, same like general responsibilities. And you could have an OT who's been practicing for over 30 years, and you can have a speech therapist who just finished their CF and are, 1 year out of practice. And they're kind of, you have to, in collaborating together in a sense. And I know, so my mom has been a school-based OT for over 30 years. When she first started, like there wasn't email. So, obviously things have evolved. She uses email all the time, but that's not her first method of communication necessarily. Maybe it is, sorry, mom. But, in the terms of versus someone of her, newer OT or new speech therapist who is Gen Z and is, just graduated school, and that's all they know. And so the sense of like this, we have to kind of collaborate and work together and know that there are what someone might prefer or go to is based on their experience rather than trying to be like this is the best way. That's just like this is what I know and what I'm more comfortable with.
Well, and I'd imagine it really, really connects to the interprofessional communication component that you guys were talking about. I think when you're identifying the roles and you're identifying whose scope is what, and you're figuring out, okay, what is the best method of communication? I think maybe having some explicit conversations, just like you did about the roles, could be
Mhm.
helpful in terms of what is your preference for communication style, because all of these are areas where I think about some of the collaboration that I've done in my role in schools and in outpatient settings, and you sort of just go into the mode. Okay, this is how we do this. This is how we do this. And I've never even paused to gather information about how the other people I'm collaborating with would actually prefer to meet or receive information or communicate. So it's also very connected to that for me in hearing you guys
Mhm.
talk about it.
Absolutely.
And I think just as a closing consideration, again, your personal preference or maybe a colleague's personal preference may not be consistent with their quote unquote generation. But so it's important to not generalize or stereotype entire generations. But, this data that we've shared is from a very big survey. So these preferences do exist. And that I think is the most important to recognize, that people will just have different preferences. And just use respectful language, use neutral, respectful language when describing generational traits, rather than saying older generations are out of touch with technology. You can say different generations may have varying levels of comfort with technology. I think of my parents. My dad has always been ahead of the curve. He would fall into that boomer range, but he is incredibly, incredibly, incredibly tech savvy. And whereas my mom, who falls into that range, she needs support with opening up her Outlook and email and that sort of thing. So again, you can't just full on stereotype, and focusing on those strengths and emphasizing the different strengths that each colleague or each generation, so to speak, contributes, is very important than perceiving things as differences or weaknesses. And that, and this also applies, we talk about, successful collaboration, but again, this also goes back to when we're collaborating with clients and their families. We're working with a very wide age range of clients and family members. So make sure to also include, if this is something you're exploring in your workplace, how generational diversity can enhance that collaboration and creativity, rather than framing them as differences or feeling like you have obstacles when you're working with certain clients and families. So all starts with communication. Just have conversations about it. Yeah. And I think we're ready to talk about the ocean framework.
Yeah, I'm really curious to hear about these components of personality awareness.
Yes. So I think, we went back and forth how we wanted to structure these different objectives. And I think that the personality awareness using the Big Five ocean framework, which is what we're going to talk about, ties in nicely at the end, because you can look back at some of those 6 competencies for interprofessional collaboration and some of these generational differences. And a lot of that will interweave with some of these this Big Five framework. And we'll talk about what that is. And we're digging a little bit more into the personality of different people. So that's fun. Out of curiosity, have any of you taken a personality test before you either applied to a job or during like a workplace, like seminar or workshop?
I have. I'm the rare psycho killer one. every time.
I don't think that one's in here, but
It's not a psycho killer one. But I can't remember the acronyms, but I'm the really rare personality type that makes people look at me weird when I tell them that. I can't remember which one it is.
Like when I took my Harry Potter sorting and I was a Slytherin, and I was like,
no.
whoa.
Oh man.
That surprises me, honestly.
I don't know how valid that test that I took was. So
I think it's more valid than my personality test. Sure.
Has the Harry Potter sorting test been empirically validated? This is the question.
Exactly.
Wow, we submitted the wrong paper, everybody. Yes.
No,
Wouldn't that be fun if we were all a different house? That would be
That would be fun.
Study.
I can feel like a live podcast recording coming on speech pathology and the Harry Potter sorting hat research. There's going to be some good research coming out of that. But anyway, I didn't mean to derail you. I have taken one of those tests.
Okay. Well, maybe some of the questions or some of the findings, let us know if any of that is consistent with some of these areas that we're describing. I know that there are a lot of different workplace personality assessments. I know like Myers-Briggs is a really common one, and I know there's like 16 or something. But the Big Five Ocean Framework, which we are going to talk about, there are 5 personality traits. And so let's talk about how some of these personality traits can further enhance collaboration. So the Big Five personality traits, also known as OCEAN, that's an acronym for each of the individual personality traits. It's often used by psychologists and offer a comprehensive framework to understand individual differences. Again, understanding and awareness there's a theme here. I believe this framework has been around since about like the 60s or 70s, but in 1981, psychologist Lewis Goldberg coined the term, coined OCEAN, the Big Five, and has been further refined and accepted over the years. So the Big Five, the BFI, consists of a series of statements that respondents rate on a scale, typically from strongly disagree to strongly agree. I know that we've all taken little assessments or filled out questionnaires like that. So the BFI helps to identify where an individual falls on each of the 5 dimensions, and this can provide insights into their personality characteristics, which can be useful for personal development, career planning, and improving interpersonal relationships. So an example question might be, or an example statement would be, I see myself as someone who is dependable and self-disciplined. And then you would rate yourself on a scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree. So the first, the O in the OCEAN traits is openness. And so that is the personality that is willing to try new ideas and practices. So this personality type might encourage creative problem solving and is very open to the ideas and perspectives of others. I think in our field, we all it's important that we all have a sense of openness, because we, a big part of our ethical requirements is our cultural sensitivity and responsiveness. And, that requires a sense of openness. Not every client is going to live or have the same cultural values or beliefs as you do. Same thing with your colleagues. So it's important that, that's not something that we take into consideration when we want to provide our clients with the best care. Well, we do take it into consideration, but it's only to provide our clients the best care without any sorts of judgment. So that's openness. So team members and high openness, I think I mentioned this, bring creativity to the table, but maybe they need a clear structure to channel their ideas effectively. I'll give myself as an example in my partnership with Becca. I love trying new things, changing things up. Maybe, that's why I love to do design. I'm always like, should we change our logo? Should we do this? And Becca's that channel for me, which we'll get into the conscientiousness. Becca's that channel for me where, she's very open to hear some of my ideas, but she might, she's there to filter them and say, okay, well, A, B, and C look good and we have time for that. But you know what? Maybe we can put these other on hold. So openness, as I was starting to say, conscientiousness, that's the personality trait that's a little bit more self-disciplined, meets and exceeds expectations, that a little bit more regimented personality, which, Becca, thank you for being there for me. While I do feel like I have a strong sense of conscientiousness, I still think that that is one of those personality traits that Becca really contributes positively to our duo. So that's also the person that is establishing clear expectation responsibilities with the team. Highly conscientious professionals tend to be organized and reliable, making them ideal for the roles requiring planning and follow through. So, and that's, it's very important to have that type of personality on a team. And then another personality in the Ocean framework is extroversion. So we all know extroverts. They're energetic. They enjoy working with people. They like to facilitate opportunities for social interaction and teamwork. Extroverted team members often excel in roles that require frequent communication. Again, hi, I love to meet with you in person, Becca. And so, what was that?
No, I just was laughing.
And appreciate social interaction, such as client-facing positions.
I would just to kind of add in and thinking about the differences and how things come together with a team in the sense of when we look at, some of that role clarification or the leadership, trying to figure out how a team can kind of work together. As Christy mentioned, I definitely am like high on the conscientiousness side of things. Like I can keep track of due dates and I can make sure things are submitted on time and uploaded on time. And we have all of our I's dotted, T's crossed, what have you. But then less on the extroversion side. So if there is a role that says, okay, this person is going to check in with the client's parents every week and have that face-to-face conversation, I'm not going to volunteer myself for that role. I can do it, but I'm not going to volunteer myself for that role. But I will take the role of organizing and filing the paperwork and all of that. And so that's kind of looking at like, okay, this is where my personality lies. And so this is kind of how we can decide that role and work together as a team. And as we'll go into a little bit more, Christy and I are very similar in some ways, but also very different in other ways. And we kind of have learned how we can collaborate effectively in a sense of like, we can take on different jobs because it fits our personalities better.
And, it's not something that happens overnight. Obviously, Becca and I've been collaborating for a really long time. So I think that exposure is important, and going back to the human piece of interacting with your team, you'll learn a lot, not by just having structured team meetings, but by having conversations and learning a little bit more, being open, right? And learning a little bit more about who exactly you're working with. We also have a sense of inferencing skills. I would like to think that we also could, you know, based on our casual, maybe non-professional interactions, would be able to get a stronger sense of some of our colleagues' preferences and just their sense of self. So I think tying in these ocean traits to some of what we talked about before, this is kind of like tying all these pieces together can help achieve the most successful collaboration. Becca, do you want to go into talking about the other two parts of the ocean framework?
Sure. So we covered the O, the C, the E. Now we'll go into A, which is agreeableness. So basically, it is what it sounds like, getting along with others, being agreeable, really promoting that culture of empathy, cooperation, wanting to maintain harmony, all really good things. I would say what could be difficult is if someone is highly agreeable and there is a conflict and not wanting to sort of kind of address the conflict or try to get to the root of it. And that can impact that collaboration and that effective work down the line. But people who are highly agreeable, so people who are highly agreeable may not want to be the person to kind of address a conflict, whereas someone else who says, I it doesn't impact me as much to not get along with someone or to have a dissenting opinion. I am more willing to do that. Might be someone who can kind of manage conflicts or kind of take that role when you're working together on a team. Things. And then N is neuroticism. So this is kind of having a tendency towards stronger, would say negative emotions, but kind of emotions such as like being prone to anxiety, being prone to getting angry easily. And, this can be a situation if we go back to the baby in the back seat, someone who is just like, I'm mad because this is not getting done, and quick to being like, they're not doing this, so and so's not doing their job. And then someone who might be lower on their neuroticism scale might say, that person, I'm going to let them sit through 5 red light cycles before I even, bring it up or get angry about it. But at the same time, someone who maybe is higher in neuroticism may get stressed easily. So I think that I know you can think about probably people on a team, maybe yourself, who is like, I get so stressed in these situations, and I look around and so and so is not stressed, or a situation where I'm not stressed that this plan we had did not work out well at all today. Whereas someone else might be like, this plan didn't work and now I am not going to be able to sleep tonight. So kind of understanding that some people may respond to the same situation in a more heightened way or in a less heightened way. It can be helpful to know, okay, this is not because they don't care about it as much, or it's because of like, this is kind of more their personality, is they're not going to jump to that anxiety or the worry as much. And so being able to kind of support other people is helpful so that we can kind of, move the path forward.
Would you recommend for anyone listening who's maybe thinking about personality tests for the first time or reflecting on how this intersects with their current team, or even how this is reflecting on themselves and what personality traits they may have? Are there certain things that in your reading of the literature and reviewing all of this material, um, is there one that is more beneficial over the other? So in other words, is it more helpful for a clinician to reflect on their own personality and what they're bringing into the table versus making assumptions or pigeonholing a colleague, well, they're very neurotic, so I'm just going to X, Y, and Z. How does that, what would be your thought there in terms of what a clinician can actually do with this information for themselves and for others?
That's a great question. I would say I think it's been helpful to think about how I think about certain situations and respond to certain situations, and might say, okay, the reason why I um, am less eager to get on the phone with this client is because the extroversion is like harder for me, and it's not, and or um the reason why I'm really struggling to change my plan is because, oh, I tend to be a little bit less open. And so I guess for me it's helpful to know that, like, just because I see things from a certain perspective, it's not how everyone else might see something from a certain perspective. um I don't know what you think, Christy, but I think it's been helpful for me to kind of think about, where do I fall on these scales, and how I can think about other people might fall in a different place and how they might respond or act.
Yeah, and I agree in that sense. I think that where I haven't taken one of these formal personality assessments in any of my workplaces, I think now that we've read some of the literature about it and we've examined it, that doing the work, so to speak, kind of starts with yourself. So I think even if I didn't have colleagues that were looking at the same information, but I've been able to look at this information and kind of do a self-assessment, I do think that, I'm avoiding labeling other people, so to speak, but it helps me understand myself and what I have the power to change, because you know what they say, you can't change other people. You can only control what you can control. And I think it also helps you put into perspective what you can control. But I think perhaps some of the most beneficial uses of some of these personality assessments, though, is that, you each complete the questionnaire or assessment or what have you, and then, should you feel comfortable in your workplace, that opens up to sharing and a collaborative discussion. And then usually I would imagine, if this was during some sort of a workshop, that they would go into how the different personality strengths can support one another, or if there are certain limitations with different personality types, that what other team members can help out in the areas that maybe someone isn't, I don't want to say performing the highest, but, like for me, who doesn't meet like the highest bar of conscientiousness. Becca shares her questionnaire and she has a higher level. Okay, great. What can you do? Let's chat. What can you do to contribute to some of the areas that I may need support with? And I think that having this framework, it helps take things a little less personal, and it helps this whole topic be a little bit more approachable, that it's coming from actual literature, self-reporting. I think that helps. But I think that using this framework, and then also considering the other frameworks as well that we talked about, the competencies and the generational differences, can really help with collaboration as a whole. And again, the ocean traits, you're not just one full trait and that's all that you are. Obviously, these traits exist in ranges. And some folks may be a little bit more on the strongly agree side of that range than others. If that answered your question.
No, it did. It really did. We've talked so much about collaboration on this podcast, but we've never really looked at it through a generational lens or a personality lens. And I think that these two components are very helpful in terms of what we bring to the table, the lens that we're looking through when we're interacting with colleagues, thinking about our role on the team, what we can contribute, areas where we might need more support or we might need to advocate for more support. This has all been really incredibly helpful. I'm wondering in our last few minutes if you have any final suggestions or thoughts for our audience.
Yeah, I mean, as you heard, we covered a lot of different things, and we just kind of, dipped our toes into some of these things in terms of the competencies, the generational trends, and different personality types. So we wanted to provide a broad overview to say, like, these are different things to kind of think about. And when you're thinking about collaboration and you're trying to maybe establish good collaboration on a new team or improve collaboration, it can be helpful to think about, okay, different areas of interprofessional competencies, generational trends, personality types, and how they kind of all come together. So our goal was to kind of, increase that awareness of it. And you may find like taking bits and pieces of each of these can be helpful for you in your setting. And as you mentioned at the beginning, the reason why we feel so strongly about effective collaboration is that we really do believe that it can improve client outcomes. And so that's what we're here for, is like when the team collaborates together, the clients win out. And it also can be helpful, in terms of having a more inclusive and productive work environment. So saying, like, we can get things done, we can be efficient, but also we can be inclusive and understand that we're all different, and being different is not bad. Being different is just being different, and everyone brings their own strengths to work together on a team, whether it's you're working with other health professionals, you're working with a client, or even if you, as a speech language pathologist, you are in the same setting and there's 2 or 3 of you in the same setting, that intraprofessional collaboration can also be really helpful. And we want to, as we mentioned before, like understand and respect differences, and think about that rather than being bad things, that there are strengths that everyone has. And we can, by thinking about the strengths, that can help with that collaboration and therefore our clients.
I agree with what Becca said. And, you may find that there are certain, maybe personality assessments, maybe workplace frameworks that are more suitable for the place that you're working. Which is why we wanted to give you a little bit of an array. But what Becca said about how just being inclusive to those differences and having some awareness can, just decrease you taking things personally, which can, deter from you doing your best. And there's a reason why, in the 90s, I think about those posters that say teamwork or, all of those like very morale boosting types of, I think of those morale types of posters on, workplace walls, whatever, but they're reminders, right? And I think that some of these frameworks and assessments can give you exposure and reminders, just ways that you can improve your own collaboration, looking inward, and all in all to support, our clients and their families.
Thank you so much for sharing your time and your hive mind, your
Yes.
collaborative hive mind with us and our listeners. This was really wonderful. We're really grateful. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for having us. We enjoyed this a lot.
Yes, we really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you both so much. This is great.
Thank you again to our corporate sponsor, Ventress Learning, publisher of the Assessment of Literacy in Language, or ALL, and the Diagnostic Evaluation of Language Variation, or the DEL. SLPs, school psychologists, and reading specialists use the ALL to diagnose developmental language disorder and to assess for emergent literacy skills, including dyslexia, for children ages 4 through 6. The DEL is appropriate for students ages 4 through 9 who speak all varieties of English. To learn more, visit www.ventresslearning.com.
Thank you so much for joining us in today's episode. As always, you can use this episode for ASHA CEUs. You can also potentially use this episode for other credits depending on the regulations of your governing body. To determine if this episode will count towards professional development in your area of study, please check in with your governing bodies, or you can go to our website, www.slpnerdcast.com. All of the references and information listed throughout the course of the episode will be listed in the show notes. And as always, if you have any questions, please email us at info@slpnerdcast.com. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to welcome you back here again soon.